Farmers Institute here on the agri-practice proposal. So I believe you have a presentation. Hopefully it's loaded and ready to go. And if you could take the podium, whoever's going to speak. And we'll let you proceed. I understand your presentation may go over 10 minutes, but that's only if Murray speaks.
Well, we'll try to skip over a few slides that might bore you with too much detail, but if we could have our presentation up. So what we're here for today, of course, is to introduce you to the concept of the agriplex. The agriplex is being proposed by the Comox Valley Farmers Institute and a committee made up of some community members who have been working on this for about a year in terms of getting a proposal out for the community to consider. And what we're going to ask at the end from you is a letter of support and principle for the building concept. So what you see here is the end views of the building that we're proposing. It's a significant sized building. It's the main hall is 56,000 square feet. Overall, the building will probably be close to 60,000. We'll go into the floor plan in a while. We want to just talk about a few of the things that you see on the slide there, and we won't stay on that slide very long. So we think there's a need for, we're calling this a trade convention center. It's not really a convention center. It's the traditional view of what those are. It's facilities that will be a multi-purpose building for the valley. The valley has a number of venues that will seat a few hundred people at a time. There's many times that those venues just aren't big enough to host the kinds of things that we see happening in the valley now, like trade shows and various other activities. We think that the valley is losing revenue and losing economic benefits because we don't have a facility like this. There's an inconvenience in managing current events. Some of you were at our Island Ag Show here a year and a half ago where we used the Philberg Center, the Native Sons Hall, the parking lots in between, and we were very fortunate in February it wasn't raining because we were able to have things going on outside. And again, it really wasn't even big enough for what we were trying to do there. And so we, as a group of Farmers Institute, decided we should take the lead, do what we consider to be a legacy type of project from agriculture that will benefit the valley for years to come. And we really don't see ourselves as being the people that will run this, but we do want to be the people who drive forward the idea of having this in place. Lots of benefits to the community. We'll run through those very quickly. On the economic development side, you see this is supporting and enhancing agriculture and the aquaculture sectors, attracting incremental spending by delegates and exhibitors. So if you think about the building the size that we are proposing, could host small conventions and trade shows of, say, 1,000 to 2,000 people, which could attract people from all over the country to the valley. While they're here, they're going to leave a whole lot of recreational and accommodation money behind, so we see this as supporting various industries in the valley, from tourism and all the aspects of that. Lots of economic impacts, extending the seasonality of our visiting seasons, attracting larger events and promoting the Comox Valley, and accommodating the region's employment intensity, so doing things that will support those things that currently drive the economy in the valley. On the business development side, supported development of local food markets. One of the uses of the building that we envision would be the farmers markets. We're going to be speaking with them tomorrow. Some of the members have already seen this. You know that it's a constant problem for them to find a space or a facility, especially at this time of year, that can accommodate them. They keep having to move around because there really isn't a place for them to be, and we think this would be something that they would use on a regular basis. Attracting new business audiences, supporting local jobs, and new investment in growing businesses. On the community enhancement side, new and expanded events, supporting the activities of local businesses, professionals. We were talking earlier about Rotary events that are currently being held outside at the fairgrounds because there just isn't a facility big enough to handle them. This would, we're integrating the community, source of non-resident based tax revenue, talking to all those tourists that we'd like to attract. The valley, as you know, has steady population growth. It's easily accessible. You can get to Comox Valley just as easily as any place else in BC from the rest of Canada. We have great air connections. The airport is key to this, and we think that key industries will grow, especially on the tourism side and agriculture. So on the design, these are the end views of the building, and you see that there are modules that are kind of off the outside. The building itself is an engineered structure, 140 by 400 is what's proposed. We don't know if that will actually be the dimensions in the end. We're going into a community consultation process with a number of groups that have already expressed an interest in using it. And we need to find out what they need in the building. We're proposing the building as it is, and what it will actually end up looking like will be determined by the consultations that we do. So the green area is the main hall, 140 by 400. And on the top right, you'll see a module that's a washroom pavilion, and you'll see further over on the other side there's another one like it, but it's not covered in. That's what we call phase 1, which is the building and a washroom pavilion to make the building basically usable. And that would be suitable for 2,000 people from a health regulation perspective to have just the one washroom module. Then if we go on to see the red modules in phase 2, and that's where we add all the features that would make it more of a trade show type of building. The second washroom module, that actually increases the potential for a number of people to be using the building up to 5,000 at a time. The module in the middle at the top is a commercial kitchen with bar facilities so that you could host up to 2,800 people in a banquet-style seating, which sounds like a lot. You don't have to have them all in there at the same time. Below the two outside pavilions on the left and right side are storage facilities. If you're having trade shows and various things, you need pipe and drape and all those kinds of things. So you need to get them out of there to host things like pickleball, which we heard about last night. And so those would be the storage facilities to hold that. The other in the middle at the bottom there is a two-story administration pavilion. So that would be where the main entrance is, offices, meeting rooms, the kinds of things that you need to have for the building to operate smoothly. This is where we envision it being situated on the property. You can see that it's at the corner of headquarters in Duff Creek. The new addition there goes off to the left. The white spot on the right here, the white building, is the curling rink, so that kind of helps you get the perspective, and that's Vanier Drive going off up to the top. So it's partly on the floodplain and partly above the floodplain. The building could move perhaps to the right and be less floodplain, but there's a remediation that can be done to make that building work in that floodplain area. It just means taking some materials up and putting other materials in. And then below in the blue square, we envision that as being the parking. Actually, the fairgrounds needs parking. Anybody who's been around that area during events knows that it's a parking nightmare around there. So that whole area along Duff Creek Road could be parking almost right down to the river, and you get all thousands of cars. And also for things like music festival, camping, which is a big thing at that time of year. So we have an exhibition space, as I say, of 56,000 square feet, offices, meeting spaces, storage and kitchen, and of course all that parking down below. Lots of services that would be required in the building. We need to look at making sure that we have a number of other facilities in there, like bleachers, soundproofing for breaking the hall into more than one, because it is such a big facility that you could host separate events if you had a good divider running through it. So So we see national and provincial events could be used there. Farming, agriculture, and aquaculture would use it. Innovation, technology, machinery. There was a discussion about how innovation, technology is really becoming an important part of the valley. Various kinds of community events, we touched on a few of them, recreation and sports. And I know that there's a review going on at the regional district around recreation facilities. You could host all kinds of indoor sports events in a facility like this, and it's done in other places. Some risks, obviously it's on a floodplain. We need to look for bleachers, acoustics, space dividers, lighting, all of those things. The fairgrounds are in the ALR. We would need the Agricultural Land Commission approval on this. Obtaining public consent and support of key parties. So getting back to the ALR approval, lots of other communities of the size of the Comox Valley have a facility like this, and many of them happen to be on ALR land. Duncan has a facility on ALR land. Chilliwack, Saanich, Abbotsford, a number of communities. So we're not reinventing the wheel. This has been done in other places successfully. Comparable facilities on the island. You see Victoria Conference Center, 73,000 square feet, very different kind of layout than what we're proposing. Vancouver Island Conference Center, again, is more like a convention center with seating and breakout rooms. It doesn't have the big hall type of thing that we're proposing. And our agriplex up there in the Comox Valley would be 56,000 square feet. It's on the same concept as TradeX. If you've ever been to TradeX in Abbotsford, which is, of course, a much bigger facility, but the same idea in terms of how the building would operate. And on the ownership side, we see that this would be on regional district land. So the regional district would be the owners of the building. Could be contracted out for management purposes to a managing board. It could be a company or a society. And that's the way it's done in other places. I know the Naimos has a corporation running it, and Duncan's has a society, Chilliwack has a society. So we're not, again, trying to come up with a new model. It's been done elsewhere, and we just look at what's being done in other places. Very good.
Go ahead, please. By the way, for those of you who were at the regional district yesterday, we apologize that you actually did the same thing again, but we think it's important. I've really, all the time I've lived in the Comox Valley, I've been a supporter, at least when I got out of school, supporter of economic development. And you can wait for it to come to you, but you do things like build the new civilian terminal to enable more people to come to the Comox Valley, and look how it's benefited the valley. You get developers, first-class developers like Crown Isle. It attracts a lot of people. I think this building that we're talking about will be probably right up there with the civilian air terminal as being a real boost for local economy. Right now, the biggest, I think the Philbrook has about 400, can seat about 400 some odd people, and that's really squeezing them in. But if you have, well, for instance, we could probably have the UBCM here if we had a building of this size. But we're really limited and to what conventions will come to the valley. And other trade shows. And you think, well, that's an awful big building. And it is the farming community that usually tries to take charge or influence what happens down there. And you think, well, the trade center or the convention center, what's that got to do with farming? But the problem is, if you don't have a building of a certain size, it won't attract the things that you need, like the conventions and the trade shows, that will enable the farmers to be able to use the building for their purposes. And what's nice if you take a look at Nanaimo or you take a look at Victoria, they have convention centers, but you can only do certain things. You can have a convention, you can have speakers in, but they're all small rooms. This building, we can have the convention in, but we can also have the trade show in. We could have a horse show in. We could have pickleball or whatever. You can, it's a one big building, the center section with no internal columns. So, there's so many things. And we think we've listed a bunch of activities that can happen there. But there's a lot of activities we haven't even thought about. But unless you have the facilities, it won't happen. And I was on economic development for 15 years, and I have to say that this really makes me excited. And that's it.
Okay, thanks. There may be some questions. If I could have the members of council rejoin us at the table, that'd be good. I think you guys are done with your presentation for now.
Yeah, I just want to put that slide up.
Sure. So maybe those who weren't at the regional district can ask the first questions, if they have any.
Go ahead. Question. So just today I was reading in the paper about Nanaimo wanting to make their building down there. Do you see that as any competition here, or do we have enough here that could support a building of our own?
We can support it.
Yeah.
Of our own.
And I'd like to add something to it. I had lunch with Roger McKinnon today, who lives in Nanaimo and everything else and is very involved, and he said, Nanaimo is going to be really upset if you guys go ahead with this project, because they're limited in what they can do on that convention center.
Right.
They're limited not because of hotels, but they're limited. And you couldn't have truck owners show equipment there.
Right.
I was quite surprised to hear that we actually have about double the number of hotel rooms in Nanaimo.
Councillor?
Yeah, that was my question. Yesterday was hotel rooms, and I think the answer, because we happen to have economic development there, told us that we would easily be able to handle that. Between that and bed and breakfast and campsites and all that wouldn't be a problem. Funding model, is there a funding plan that you have, or how would we go about doing that?
Well, that's, we're starting, I think next week we have we're inviting a number of community members to join us for to start a committee. We have some funding ideas, but we haven't actually gotten started with that. That's the next step for us, is to actually get the community behind the funding.
But there's a plan there that
There
you
is,
can
yes.
And are you thinking of you have this in phases, so are you thinking of building phase 1 and then phase 2, or are you hoping to build the whole thing together, or what's the thought there?
You could do it in phases. My feeling is you need phase 2 to really make the building a viable building for all the things that we're talking about. Otherwise, it would just be a big hall and play a lot of pickleball in it.
Well, there's a lot of
Nothing wrong with that.
apparently.
I understand it's become an issue at the regional district.
Just keep in mind the pickleballers don't like paying any more than $3, so I don't think you want to rely on them for revenue.
24-hour pickleball.
Yeah. The report that was attached to our agenda, thank you for that as well, has a statement in it, like your comments on it. Says the facility would likely be a loss leader and require support for its operating budget. In most cases, these facilities are supported by local government in order to attract economic and community impacts. Phases 1 and 2, of course, are $9 million. There's still $1.5 million for parking. I mean, if you can crack the nut on the capital side, how do you see the operational side being addressed? The TradeX shows an operational cost. That's the one in Abbott's for about $200,000 a month. So, regional district, to my knowledge, doesn't have that kind of money.
Sure.
Neither do we. So, how do you see that going?
Right. Okay, so on I think it's on page 31 of the business case, there's a bit of a breakdown of what facilities like this experience in terms of revenue and expenses, and typically the expenses are about 94% of the revenue on an operating basis in a facility like this. And the reason you consider it a loss leader is because you never recover your capital. But it should be able to pay the majority of its own way
Of the operations.
of operations, yes.
All right.
But you're right, you'd never get the original capital investment back. That's an investment in the community.
Right, similar to, I guess, the new airport terminal.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I was really glad to see that you did identify that convention centres are generally a lost leader. I did just do a quick Google today, and basically it said even in the rare cases where revenues cover operating costs in the meeting facilities, they don't cover the debt services.
Exactly.
And I saw it was for 2013, but I think the 9 notes, they were paying $250,000 in their annual budget to keep it going. So I do think it's really important. I'm really glad to hear you working with the community group to find the fit, because it's all part of that process too, to look at how should that land be used. And I think, maybe we'd be better looking at what are the needs of our community, and if we get some convention use, great, because I still have a concern about the hotel spaces, and as I said, I did a bit of Googling, and it was saying how important, one of the number one things is the hotel spaces. The best facility isn't enough to make meeting groups come to you. Of great importance are hotels. They must be of sufficient quality, not merely motels. They must be sufficient quantity, not only the number of rooms in total, but a sufficient number which can be booked months and years. Because as you know from the UECM, it's that's a year ahead. You have to be able to block for the big ones many years in advance. So I think it's important that piece is definitely something that needs to be.
And just in comment to that, we see ourselves as forming partnerships in the community at this point with user groups, with business groups that will benefit from having a facility like that, with economic development, with all the groups that could possibly have an input or use of the building. So that's where we're at now, is developing those partnerships. That's really important.
Great, and I was glad the farmers market, and I'm glad you're
Yes.
meeting with them. I was intrigued too when you mentioned too, and I saw in the report that you could use it for riding. So you could have a floor that you could actually ride on and have a banquet in the evening.
If you see, well, not the same day. You can see there's large doors at either end, and you can drive any kind of equipment that exists in and out of those doors. So, and it's a concrete floor with proposed about concrete walls around the outside about this high. So you can actually bring in material because it's a big open area. Right? You can bring a sawdust, you can bring the sand, whatever you need for events like that, and then you move it all back out, power wash it, set up your banquet tables.
So I think it is good, and hope with some flexibility on the size. The community said, well, actually, a smaller size or a bigger size, because I think it's what the community wants, and any conventions that we could get, they'll be
And
opposed.
it's interesting that you're saying that, because what we're hearing from some groups is it really isn't big enough.
Councillor Grant and McKinnon, I don't know if you have your hands up on the side. Do you have any questions? Go ahead.
I don't have a question, it's simply a comment, and just a footnote to Murray's comments, really. For years and years, all these silver hairs tell you how many years we have in fact been saying there's only one thing left that we really need to do in this valley, and of course you've identified it, but now you're making it a reality, and I congratulate you, I wish you the best, and look forward to your progress reports. Thank you.
Councillor McKinnon?
Just quickly, following what Councillor Grant said, appreciate your efforts, and this is a labor of love, it sounds like, and you feel strongly about your community. You mentioned at the start that you're looking for a letter of support, and I may have misheard it there, but if you receive the letter of support, it's then you're going to give you permission to connect with the community and enhance the business plan? Is that the intent there? And then bring it back to...
Well, yeah, we've been actually told by a few funding sources that they want to have indicated support from the community. So we do need that.
We won't get it built unless we can show community support.
Yeah.
Anybody who's a potential lender, provider of funds, they want to know that the community's backing, especially if you're starting to do provincial and federal levels of politicians. I mean, they want to know that they're going to get some credit for, and it's something that the community wants.
Right, but it would be difficult for us to support it other than perhaps in principle. We can't commit, obviously, to any funding, because that may or may not require a referendum.
Right.
And obviously, we'll have to couch our letter, if we do provide such a letter, in very general terms.
Yes.
And that's what happened at the RD last night. We did give a very general letter of support. So,
And this is our practice here, we don't provide any sort of
Thank you.
letters until after the next meeting. We don't usually grant that right at this meeting.
Okay.
And at this point, that's all we can ask for is a letter of support, because we don't know what eventually will end up there. I mean, the community people that we talk to may say, you should go for a bigger building. They may say, you should go for a smaller building. They may want it done up in a different manner. So we don't know what the actual cost is. So all we wanted you to do is say, hey, that sounds good. We would like to support it.
All right, I know you may have a question from one of the audience, but we'll have to ask that of you after. There is, only one other question I had is, where is CV Exhibition Association in all this?
We originally worked with them for 6 months to see if we could do a joint project with them, because they have a request for a building on this site as well, a much smaller building than this. After 6 months, they decided they wanted to go their own way and still pursue their own building. So as far as we know, that's still what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what I surmised. They had an application into the Island Coastal Economic Trust, so
Yes.
that's pending.
Yeah, and we don't really know what's happening with that.
All right, well, hopefully that can
Yeah.
be sorted out. All right, seeing no further questions, go
One
ahead.
quick question. With the parking, do you see it as being grass parking?
Yeah,
It's a big area.
Brian, I think maybe you're more familiar with that, but
Well, it hasn't really been nailed down whether we go with a hard, gravelly, grassy area parking or with paved parking. That's still kind of up in the air to what best suits the community.
there has been some discussion around the types of grass parking that are out there now that you could put on that site. So that it is a on our land, we don't have it drained. So
And then you have camping and stuff.
camping on it, yeah.
We are very cautious in making sure if somebody parks a car there, that they can get the car out later on. So this is good, but we want it as green as possible.
It's going to be used in the winter, so we've got to be able to
Yeah.
park there in the winter.
Yeah.
They're going to camp out.
parking in October.
All right, well, thanks, gentlemen, for your presentations.
Thank you.
And for your enthusiasm.
All right, so we'll move on, and that matter will come back to us at a subsequent meeting for consideration of a letter of support. Probably the first meeting in December. All right, so we'll move on to minutes of meeting, council meeting of November 2nd for approval. On approval then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Committee, the whole meeting minutes of November 9th were received. Not received then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. Recommendations coming forward from that were renewal of the Fire Protection Improvement District agreement.
Move that.
Second.
That's for a 5-year term starting January 2017 until the end of 2021. Any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. And then regarding the transfer of ownership of the Dragon Boat, we first have that ownership of that boat to be transferred to the Dragon Boat Society, and space for mortgage to be provided at no cost for a period of 1 year ending on November 9, 2017.
Move.
Second.
On that, any discussion? All those in favor? Motion's carried. And secondly, that the provision of longer-term mortgage be considered as part of the overall marina strategy. Those in favor? Motion's carried. That's the recommendations coming out of committee of the whole, and so move on to the manager report for receipts.
Move receipt.
Second.
On receipt then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. CEO, do you have any updates for us on the marina project?
Well, if you look in the light of day, you'll see that some of the beams are coming up now, and so there's progress continuing. The break in the weather from the rain has allowed concrete to be poured and more of the project to proceed, so we're happy to see that moving along.
So we're still on track as far as
We're still on track.
Good. Thank you for the update. Any further questions on the manager report? Seeing none, we'll move on to receiving minutes of meetings of the regional district.
Move receipt.
Second.
And that is for the Comox Strathcona Waste Management Hospital Board. All those in favor? Motion's carried. Any questions or issues arising out of that? We'll deal with perhaps in our council reports. So move on to the water rate bylaw, and that is for first, second, and third reading.
Move.
I'll second.
Any discussion on the water rate bylaws? So those reflect the discussions that we had on October 12th, and staff have brought that forward also with some information on where we've been in terms of parcel tax and user fees over the last number of years in terms of water, sewer, and garbage. All right, so no further discussion. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion's carried. Moving on to correspondence, we have from the ABICC a notice regarding resolutions.
Move receipt.
Second.
Receipt then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. And just referencing the deadline for any resolutions and nominations to be February 21st. So if council wishes to bring anything forward for the ABICC next April in Camp River, there is a deadline in effect for that. And thank you for our president of ABICC, Councillor Price, for outlining some of the criteria for that. I think it was a useful update. Okay, so we received that, and we'll see what comes, if anything comes up over the next couple months for ABICC consideration. And the other letter is from Heritage BC regarding the Shake Sites property.
Move receipt.
Second.
Receipt then, all those in favor? Motion's carried. I would note just one correction there. Second paragraph refers to the house property and sum of money being left to the town on the passing of Mr. Lang. Well, actually, it was just that the sum of money was left to the town on his passing. Of course, the property was transferred earlier in the early 70s. So, small point, but nonetheless, we'll make reference to when we respond to it. Do we vote on receipt that? Yeah. All right, so that's it for correspondence. No other late items or delegations, reports from members of council. So we'll start with Councillor Margaret.
Thank you. Headlining my activities was the solid waste board meeting. I might comment that there's, of course, an advisory committee meeting before we have our board meeting, and it was noted that Comox was the only municipality represented at that particular meeting. It was actually raised at the table, which I thought was very interesting, and hooray for our engineer for being present there. Asbestos disposal update, that is an ongoing thing. The board, of course, is working towards a regional disposal for asbestos. And in the meantime, the disposal site is still available to us down in Victoria, Heartland, Danville, but we are working towards that solution. Also, we are getting closer to providing disposal bags at the Comox Valley and the Campbell River landfill sites. Cell 1 progress photos are on website. So if you'd like to understand that project and know just exactly how your taxpayer dollars are being spent, I really recommend you take a look. They're good pictures and they give us a good picture of what's happening thus far there. Also, we purchased a new excavator for all of the work to be done. And again, the issue of waste to energy was raised and how our organics are going to impact that. Also, proposed cost sharing formula with ABICC Special Committee in the regional districts. Hospital board was paid parking continues continues. Maybe I'll just leave it at that. It was decided, though, that because the hospital isn't opening until later in 2017, that we still have time to discuss that further. Tom Sparrow made a presentation, and just a couple of the highlights on his presentation were, one, that they still enjoy good relations with KFN. Local hires are at 65%, and Vancouver Island hires at 85%. 77 workers in the apprenticeship program, and 50 to 60 Gary Oaks will be planted, and more in the future. And of course, the big thing is the transition planning, which of course is going to be a major undertaking. And he also did say that he received a lot of questions about the cosmetics of the exterior of the hospital. And his comment was, well, we have just so many dollars, and if we had to make our choice, which we did, we chose to focus on programs and equipment, which will be state-of-the-art versus making the exterior as fancy as everyone thinks it might be.
With one coat of paint,
Yeah,
14 different shades.
there you go. And also, of course, remember today's service and particularly the museum. I was really impressed. I was really impressed with the 102nd Battalion display, which was really well done, and I think they are to be congratulated. It takes a lot of time and work. There's very limited number of volunteers and not a lot of money, and I thought they did an excellent job. That's fine, thank you.
Thank you for that. Councillor Kingrad.
Sure. Well, I attended yesterday the Sewer Commission, the Water Commission, the Sports Commission, and the Committee of the Whole. And so I'll give you a few highlights of those. And previous to that, I attended the Remembrance Day services as well. The Sewer Commission, we approved upgrades to the treatment plant in around over the next four or 5 years of probably $30 million. Our problem is the regulations have changed, so we need to get the treatment to a better level, and also we're at near capacity. So again, we're at that end of life. We need to start putting more money in. So that's what we're doing. Water, we had discussion on the watershed protection governance. We had a gal come and give us a talk on that, and you know, we do a pretty good job. We have a whole bunch of different user groups there, and we do meet with them a lot. So we're pretty much on track with that. But she had some pretty good things to say about how you should really look after your watershed, because it's an important element. Sports Commission, we talked about a heat recapture system where it recaptures the steam off the pool and other areas and then reuses it to heat hot water. The payback, we'll save about $50,000 a year on that, so the payback for that will be about 3 to 4 years, so sounds like a pretty good thing to do to me. Committee of the Whole, we had we talked about utility services, which, as you'll remember, was Rod's letter. All three municipalities disagreed with what he wanted to do there. We kind of left it that we would leave it open for discussion, but it was just too big of an issue, and there was too many issues around how you could make that possibly work. Not the least of which was that you have to find a way to pay for this. If you're going to come up with the ideas and then leave us the bill, that's not going to work. So we did that. We also had a talk on air quality. And in that discussion, it was brought up that the monitoring station in Courtenay, of course, is in the oldest part of town, with open fireplaces burning right into it with older houses. And it didn't seem that that was giving us a very good indication of what the air quality in Comox might be. So we did ask, you know, it was my point that the data that was there was flawed because of they were getting it. I said, geez, if you put that up in Crown Isle or somewhere, you probably get a completely different reading. And so if they want to actually come and tell us about air quality, they've got to at least monitor it properly. We also have the most modern monitoring stations that there are. We're sort of the test pilot, so of course we're monitoring to a much higher level than everyone else is. So there's all sorts of issues with the way the data is being collected. And it bothers me when it comes out in the vital signs report that shows that we have terrible air quality. Because we don't know if we do or not. We know there's one in their neighborhood in Courtenay that does, but we don't know beyond that. So we've asked the RD to clarify how that monitoring gets done and how that's going to go. We also are looking at an asset management program for clean water, and there is a grant program that we're looking at for that. We should be into, they would probably be coming to the RD for about a $25,000 top-up for the grant, so that we can get an asset management program around clean water, so that seemed like a pretty good idea. The other one was emergency services, and you guys will recall in the old days, emergency services, Mike Fournier used to run it. He ran it on a contract, so he wasn't an RD employee or a government employee. He was just contracted, and thus we paid by contract. So this issue, there's been issues with this come up a couple of board meetings in a row, and of course what happens because we pay by contract is that we don't get a vote. So the example was that they came for an up to increase some of the funding for the system, and of course Courtney didn't want to increase the funding, believe it or not, they were spending it all, but they didn't want to increase it, but they don't get a vote. It kind of flies against the way my thinking usually goes, but I'm thinking in this case because it's not going anywhere, this service is going to remain intact and we're going to remain paying and it's not going to cost us any more, that we should probably join that service so that we can get a vote at the table. And I leave that to our administrator to give us guidance on that, but the only downside that I can see to this is we're not getting a vote and it's not going to cost us any more to be a part of it. And at least we'd have to say in how it works then. So that's my report.
Thank you for that. I do believe with respect to air quality monitoring that Mayor Bear told me that we're getting a monitoring station in Cumberland as well.
They've got one, yeah.
Okay.
Yep. And so the monitoring station in Cumberland, they put on the old ambulance building, or on the, not the old ambulance, on the ambulance building. And their results are so far, and it's early, but they're looking like they're getting fairly good air quality coming out of that, which is what leads me to believe that the monitoring is a bit suspect, because I can remember as a kid walking through Cumberland, you'd choke going down the streets, it was so bad. So the fact that they've got a monitoring station away from some of the houses and getting good readings tells you, well, tells me that the way they're doing it is flawed. So.
Thank you for that. Councillor Arnott.
Yeah, thanks. I attended the Community Justice Center meeting the other day. Had a meeting with some of the neighbors that are backing on the area where there's been a discussion of the apartment block, and just heard from them. And I did attend Remembrance Day celebration here and on the base, and I want to give kudos to our fire department, because there's a lady who dropped right behind us, and the firemen were there lickety-split, took care of her, and they were very professional.
So that neighborhood you referenced the meeting, is that the Cougar Crest neighborhood?
Yeah, right on the other side, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it was just an ad hoc thing. We wanted to chat about some of their concerns.
Yes, briefly, I attended the Comox Valley Resource Fair at the Courtney Rec Center, where frontline people to help a lot of our most challenged citizens in the community, and a good turnout, and lots of organizations there helping out our less fortunate. As well, attended the Remembrance Day ceremonies along with all the council and the mayor, and the ProUS Museum Remembrance Day display. Kudos to all the volunteers that put on the service, and particularly the museum, and that they volunteered on Remembrance Day to come in specially and open up there, as Councillor Grant so eloquently said. Had a couple of meetings with some Comox citizens. Also met briefly with the bylaw officer about an idea of for some unkempt properties of having tying in the leadership class at Highland Secondary that might take it on as a project to offer assistance to some properties that have been reported as not being kept up, and that's an idea that is an idea now that going to be pursued a little bit. And that is my report.
All right, great. Councillor Prince.
Yes, thank you. Well, I attended the Integrated Regional Transportation Select Committee, the inaugural meeting, and basically it's made up of representation from Comox, Courtney, the RD, MOTI, the school district, 4 members of the public, and there's a seat for the First Nations, and Cumberland decided that they didn't like the format, so they're at the moment participating. The mandate I'll just pick up a bit because it does tell you that it's to consider matters relating to collaboration on regional transportation project priorities and infrastructure, including the specific promotion of a bike commuter path or multi-use corridor along Comox Road. So it's very handy that MOTI are there. And the development of an application to the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure bike EC funding for roadside greenway improvements. And the mission includes consideration of the concept of a single point of contact for transportation-related initiatives in the Comox Valley. So it is a committee with a life, and one of its duties will be to look at what does it become afterwards. I also, as with several other people, was at the lunch with Timber West, which was very informative. I attended the Remembrance Day at Glacier View with my dad, and was at the museum open house, and I was also at the Sewage Commission, Water Committee, Sports Commission, and the Committee of the Whole yesterday. Very long day. And Councillor Grant's covered, given a lot of details. Just a couple of other things. We did approve the 10-year capital plan at the Sewage Commission, and it's 48 million in spending over the next 10 years. Again, the project is driven by capacity and condition of our infrastructure, given that it was all built at the same time. And yeah, we are going to host another water forum, which will bring together all the water purveyors in the Comox Valley to share experiences. There has been some suggestion of creating that one utility for the whole Comox Valley, but it's so cumbersome and there was more discussion around maybe the forum idea, that we could have a sewage forum and we can learn from each other. Our challenges are often different. For the water treatment, we did decide to go for the design build, where it's all one contract, and that for the filtration and deep water intake, which should result in a 15% saving in costs and faster ready for grant application, and more likely to be on time and all those things. And I don't really think you mentioned pickleball.
No, I missed the pickleball thing.
Yes, pickleball.
Heard about that.
And I didn't realise, we did learn that our site at Highland is not in the picture because of soil conditions.
Well, the cost of dealing with the soil exceeds the value of the...
So we are going to do a bigger look at the whole of the Comox Valley, look for a central location outside, and we approved 10,000 for a feasibility study for a regional pickleball facility. And that is, yeah, I think you covered everything. Yes. And yeah, we had to we had the update on our annual regional growth strategy annual report. One of the problems that we face every year is that the measurables that we have are often difficult, particularly when you're out of the census period, and with the loss of the long form, now it's coming back. So out of the 18, there's only 5 that we can actually measure at the moment. And that they were all, 3 of them held true, which is we are being successful in concentrating development where the services, water use reduction and diversion of solid waste, they were all positives that were increasing our ability. And I think that's, it was long. You probably don't want to look at any more of this.
You've got to get a bigger notebook.
I got a bigger page.
One question I had, and I think Councillor Ken Grant referred to an asset management plan, an application for some funding for the water. I'm assuming that's not an application for funding the filtration plant, for example, because we're not ready yet. So I'm just wondering why it is that the regional district thinks they need to do an asset management plan, when, isn't that what we're already doing over the next 10 years, 20 years, whatever it is for both water and sewer? I'm just curious as to what that will add to the process, or is that just doing another report?
I think one of it, you know, I don't think we've done a complete asset management and opportunity. I think it was that we can get 83% grant
For the study?
for the study,
Right.
yes, and that's through the wastewater.
Right. And will that help us
Yeah.
get the grant funding for the actual building of something later? Or is that just, as again, just another report?
No, I think it'll help us with getting funding, but I think what it'll also help us with is not ending up where we are now, where we have sewer and the bill is, what was it, $40 million all coming at once at the same time as water, at the same time as garbage. And, you know, I think that if we can get the regional district thinking more, I mean, we've been doing asset management here for a long time, so we don't really think much of it, but they don't. And when they do, they tend to get sidetracked and they'll get rolling down the road, and then all of a sudden they'll spend it on, you know, something will come up and they'll spend it. Well, that's not an asset management way of doing things. So I think that the study that we're getting, A, we're getting good value for it, but B, I think it'll put them on the track on how to actually do that and do it properly so that we're not stuck with these big bills all at once. So that's, I mean, my take is it's not just another study, but it's actually going to be, you know, become a useful document.
All right, well, I guess from taxpayers' point of view, they just want to see the boil waters done away with, so.
Exactly.
So-
Well, it's not going to slow any of that down.
Okay, well, that's good to know.
Yeah.
And that's when we had, and just one last thing, the new building, we did approve, well, the COW recommended approval for setting up a service, because that's works best for the building, which will hopefully not just
Oh,
house
the
the
new office
regional
building.
district, yeah, it will house the MOTI, and including, you know, various discussions of who's going to be the players yet isn't really confirmed. But and the emphasis is that it's not going to cost more money because we already pay a huge amount on the lease.
Yeah, it's over $300,000 a year in the
Yeah.
lease, plus you're being putting away like $175,000 as in reserve. So you'll still have to borrow money though for the building.
We will.
And will that go through a public assent process?
Well, I guess it would have to. To set up the service, we have
Right.
chosen to go with the alternative approval process, but that will just set up the service.
Right.
But, and I think we didn't necessarily have to go that route, but for regional districts it does make things a lot simpler.
Well, that way we can have a service for you later on, right?
Yeah. Well, the other thing is that they're hoping that the amount that's paid in lease will cover any mortgage costs or lending that they would have, borrowing that they would have to do on it, because they're paying such a big lease amount already anyways.
Right.
That's the
So
plan.
yeah, break even is
Yeah.
the prediction, yeah.
Just add it to the shopping list. All right, Councillor Swift.
Okay, on behalf of the mayor, I attended the 50th celebration for the Lions Club, which is our local club here, and I have to say they are a small but active group. I went online and looked at some of their projects, and they're involved in a lot of things, including, which I didn't realize, lending scooters and walkers and things to people. So that was really interesting, and even a couple of them volunteered at for the Transportation Ambassador Program that took place here at the end of October for the transit system. So they got their fingers in a lot of pies. It was really interesting. I also answered the phones for the first hour of the telethon, and as you all probably know, it was another impressive year of over $111,000 that were raised.
That's because you were there.
Yeah, that was it. I attended the Timber West lunch, which was an interesting event. And I attended the solid waste and hospital meetings, and Councillor Grant's already reported on those. The hospital is still on track for opening in September. But they are looking for 5 to 6 people for an art committee for the hospital here. They have one in Campbell River that's well established and underway, but they haven't been able to get the enthusiasm here for some reason. They are looking for a variety of skill sets. You know, people that have some business sense, some administration, and fundraising abilities, which kind of scared me. But anyway, if you know of anybody that you think might be interested, you can contact Tom Sparrow and go from there. I attended the Remembrance Day ceremony and was pleased to see so many people out here again, and visited the museum thanks to your encouragement. And that was a really impressive display, so congratulations to all that were there. And the sewer meeting, where we reviewed the projects for the next 10 years.
And just one thing on that too, that we forgot to mention, I think, is that in that 10-year plan, there's a real bubble in the next 2017-18 of projects that have to be done. And the question was, how are you going to manage all these? You know,
That's for sewer you're talking about?
well, yeah, sewer, but if you combine water, yeah,
Okay.
but really sewer was where this came up. And what they're planning on doing is either possibly hiring, but probably contracting some of this work out so that they can be more as an overseer, because there's just no way that I can see that they're going to be able to manage all these projects. And of course, when we have the pump station issue there, that's such a high priority after the report we saw, we'd really like them to concentrate on that, and the other things work along. So they're cognizant of the issue. They realize that this is sort of a bubble, and that they'll probably do it by contracting people for short-term contracts rather than hiring full-time employees. So.
And you get the really specialized.
Specialized, yeah, where they need specialized people.
Yeah, there's lots of work to be done.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just report on a few things that I attended to in the last couple of weeks. Attended the UBCM Local Government Contract Management Committee meeting over in Richmond. That's to do with the RCMP contract. As you know, we have a 20-year contract, and that committee meets every 6 months or so to discuss ongoing issues, including the one we talked about here not long ago about the Auxiliary Constable Program. So there was a summary report of the submissions made by various local governments. 43 local governments had responded to that survey in the short time frame, and the vast majority of those, 39 out of 43, basically wanted to see that tiered program, as you may recall. So that information was provided to the RCMP, and it's interesting, there's over 700 auxiliary constables in 67 detachments around the province. So obviously there's a lot of interest in that program and having it continue, hopefully on a tiered basis, which does give more flexibility for local government needs. So we'll see what happens with that. Of course, there's lots of training involved with that coming forward, and on an ongoing basis that'll evolve. Other issues, I mean, numerous issues being discussed there at that meeting. A lot of cost-related issues. Some of them have been on the agenda for months and years. One thing that may come to us at some point, along with that Vancouver Island Major Crime Unit discussion that we had at UBCM, is there's some discussion around the emergency response teams being funded more on a province-wide basis rather than regional, like Vancouver or Victoria basis. So I just expressed the concern that, you know, again, this is a cost driver potentially that can impact us without really any perceived benefit. Thankfully, most of the ERT responses are not in our area, although I imagine there are some. In fact, when I was at Starbucks today, I saw one of their big vehicles and a bunch of guys loaded for bear, literally, to, I don't know what they're doing, but they're probably training. And so there is a presence in our community, but it's more of an island-wide thing.
Stopping for a donut, maybe.
Yeah. The truck they had looked pretty military in nature, but it was RCMP guys. So those issues will continue to be discussed, and I know our staff, in particular our Director of Finance, have a good handle on that as best as can be addressed on an ongoing basis so that we don't see any real surprises coming forward in our budget. But you'll see as we go into budget in the spring that RCMP will be one of those things we'll be talking about. In terms of other things that I attended, as referenced, the Timber West lunch. Oh, and I attended the Air Canada Business Lunch, which was hosted by CVEZ and the Chamber of Commerce. Good presentation by executives of the Air Canada program, talking about the recent successes they've had in expanding their services across the world. A lot more direct flights that they're doing now. And of course, with the connection here now at Comox, you can get basically anywhere in the world. So that was very interesting lunch. Of course, Remembrance Day, well attended and well organized. I was out at the base as well for a short time. Met with representatives of the Compass Adventure Sailing Group, James Robinson and Sons, just to talk about some of their future plans for some of their activities. And of course, they're continuing to work with our staff on ongoing issues in terms of their compound down there as the project proceeds. And I think that's basically, yeah, oh, I did attend briefly the presentation at the Regional District on the Agriplex, and of course CVEDS was also presenting there on their work plan, which we heard last week or so. And CVEDS will be doing their strat planning tomorrow. I'll be attending that. So we'll see where that comes in. Of course, don't forget next week, our committee of the whole was counciled in place. We're doing strategic planning starting at 3 o'clock. So that'll go on as scheduled for next week.
It's at 3 o'clock, you said.
3 o'clock start time. Yeah. And you'll see where we get to. That's my report. And so, any questions from the media at this time?
One quick one.
Yes.
Beyond receipt of the letter from Heritage BC, is there
Yes.
any further discussion about it in the subsequent meeting? Or
We have, maybe I'll just turn that over to the CEO to tell us what you can about where we're at with that.
We've drafted, I guess, our submission that would go to the Attorney General's office, and we've requested some feedback just to ensure that our application is complete, and we're still waiting to hear back on that.
And just to be clear, that's the application for direction from the courts on what we can do with that fund that was left to the town in 1982. So we'll probably be able to have a further discussion on that in the near future once we hear back from the Attorney General's office. Anything further? Okay. Alrighty, so I don't think there's any members of the public left here, and so the motion to adjourn would be over. All those in favor? Being adjourned.